The building was quiet in a way that felt wrong, like a held breath that refused to release. Machines that were designed to roar and hum stood frozen, their metal frames locked in awkward poses as if they'd been interrupted mid-thought. Overhead lights cast a sterile glow across the production floor, reflecting off polished steel and glass panels that now served no purpose except to remind everyone how expensive silence could be. Up in the control room, frustration hung thicker than the recycled air. Screens flickered with diagnostic graphs, error codes stacking like accusations. 15 engineers crowded the space, shoulders tense, voices sharp. Coffee cups sat untouched, gone cold hours ago. Someone rubbed their eyes as if staring harder at the code might force it to confess. "It doesn't make sense," one voice said, tight with disbelief. "The system passed stress tests last week." "Stress tests aren't live production," another snapped back. "Something's interfering with the synchronization." "Interfering how?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Arguments overlapped, fingers pointed at lines of code, at hardware diagrams, at each other. Every failed theory added another layer of pressure. Every minute that passed without progress meant more money evaporating into thin air. The company had invested too much into this facility for it to sit idle, especially not under the watch of executives who demanded answers and timelines, not excuses. Below them, on the production floor, a delivery truck hissed as it settled into the loading bay. The back doors swung open, and a man in a gray uniform stepped down, adjusting his gloves against the chill of the massive warehouse. He checked a tablet clipped to his belt, then began unloading sealed crates onto a rolling cart. His movements were unhurried but precise, each box placed carefully, labels aligned. As he pushed the cart forward, the silence caught his attention. Factories were never this quiet. Even during maintenance, there was usually some low mechanical murmur, some sign of life. He slowed, eyes lifting from the floor to the long rows of inactive machinery. Red warning lights blinked intermittently, casting brief pulses of color across the walls. He paused near a junction panel, tilting his head. There was a rhythm to the warning beeps, subtle but consistent. Not random. Intentional. His brow furrowed. Upstairs, a door slammed open. An engineer stormed out of the control room, pacing the narrow walkway overlooking the floor. He dragged a hand through his hair, muttering under his breath. 6 months, he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. 6 months of development, and this is what we get. The delivery driver glanced up, then back at the panel. His eyes traced the conduit lines running along the ceiling, following them as they disappeared into the walls. He took a step closer, crouching slightly to examine a small access port. "Hey!" a voice called from above. "You done down there?" He straightened. "Almost," he replied. Then, after a brief hesitation, "Can I ask you something?" The engineer looked down, irritation already etched into his face. "Make it quick." "Did you recently update the firmware on the control units?" the driver asked. The engineer blinked, surprised by the question. "Yeah." "Why?" "After the update," the driver continued calmly, "did anyone recalibrate the phase timing on the secondary line feeds?" A short laugh escaped the engineer. Not amused. Dismissive. "Listen, man, this system is way over your head. Just deliver the parts." The driver nodded once, accepting the response without visible offense. "All right," he said, returning to his cart. Inside the control room, a few engineers had noticed the exchange through the glass. One smirked. Another shook his head. "Unbelievable," someone muttered. "Everyone thinks they're an expert." The driver resumed moving, but his attention remained fixed on the machinery. He noticed a faint vibration in the floor, almost imperceptible, like the system was trying and failing to restart itself. He stopped again, this time near the main conveyor junction. His gaze lingered on a sensor mounted just above the belt, its indicator light flickering between amber and red. He checked the crate labels absent-mindedly, then looked back up. Something about the alignment was off. Not visibly broken, not damaged, just wrong. Like a sentence that was grammatically correct but still didn't read right. Upstairs, the tension escalated. "We're chasing ghosts," someone said. "Every diagnostic says the hardware's fine. Then why won't it stay online?" "Because something's triggering the safety interlock." "But there's no fault logged." "That doesn't mean there isn't one." The delivery driver took a slow breath. He knew that tone. He'd heard it before years ago, in rooms just like this one. Brilliant people boxed in by their own assumptions, unable to see past the framework they trusted too much. He cleared his throat and spoke again, louder this time. "If the safety system is tripping without a fault log," he said, "it usually means the timing mismatch is happening upstream, before the sensors can register it." The engineer on the walkway spun around. "Are you still talking?" A few laughs echoed from the control room. "Not kind ones." "Look," the driver said, keeping his voice steady, "I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. I've just seen this exact pattern before." "Oh, really?" the engineer shot back. "Where, delivering coffee machines?" That drew more laughter. The driver's jaw tightened briefly, but he didn't rise to it. "At a facility that lost $8 million in downtime before someone realized the issue wasn't the code. It was the assumption that the code couldn't be wrong." The laughter faded, replaced by an awkward pause. Not because they believed him, but because his tone hadn't wavered. No anger. No defensiveness. Just certainty. The engineer scoffed again, louder this time. "Security's going to love you," he said. "Drop the crates and move along." The driver nodded, pushing his cart toward the receiving area. But as he passed beneath the control room, a sharp alarm pierced the air. Red lights flared brighter. A conveyor belt shuddered violently, then jerked to a halt. Somewhere deeper in the plant, a robotic arm froze mid-motion, its grip locked around a half-assembled component. "What just happened?" someone shouted. "Cascade failure," another voice yelled. "We're losing the auxiliary systems." The control room erupted into chaos. Fingers flew over keyboards. Monitors filled with cascading warnings. Someone cursed loudly. On the floor, the delivery driver stopped dead in his tracks. He looked back at the junction panel he'd examined earlier. The flickering light had gone solid red. He exhaled slowly. Above him, the engineer on the walkway went pale. "That shouldn't have happened," he whispered. The driver looked up, meeting his eyes. "It will keep happening," he said quietly, "until you fix the timing." For the first time, no one laughed. The machines groaned as emergency shutdown protocols engaged, plunging sections of the plant into darkness. The cost counter in the executive's dashboard ticked higher with every passing second, unseen but brutally felt. And in the middle of the chaos, the man everyone had dismissed stood calmly beside his cart, watching the system unravel exactly the way he knew it would, wondering how much worse it would have to get before someone finally listened. The alarms didn't stop when the lights dimmed. They multiplied, layering over each other until the sound became a physical pressure in the chest. Red strobes washed across the production floor, turning steel into something that looked wounded. Emergency protocols sealed off sections automatically, thick doors sliding shut with a finality that made every mistake feel permanent. Up in the control room, no one was arguing anymore. Panic had replaced pride. Hands shook as engineers typed commands that refused to execute. The system rejected overrides like a locked door that no longer recognized its owners. "We're locked out," someone said, voice cracking. "That can't happen." "It just did." A phone buzzed. Then another. Then several at once. On the floor, the delivery driver remained still, eyes following the flow of light and shadow as the plant tried to protect itself from further damage. He had seen this stage before too. This was the moment where denial collapsed into fear. A set of doors at the far end of the building burst open. Security personnel hurried in, radios crackling. Behind them came a cluster of executives in tailored suits, their shoes striking the concrete with sharp, angry echoes. At their center was a woman whose presence seemed to pull the air inward. Her posture was rigid, her expression carved from impatience and expectation. "What happened?" she said, not as a question but as an accusation. No one answered immediately. Finally, a voice from the control room spoke through the intercom. We had a cascade failure. Multiple safety interlocks tripped simultaneously. Her eyes narrowed. I was told this issue was contained. It was, someone replied weakly. We thought. She turned toward the glass-walled control room and began walking. The engineers scattered instinctively, making room as she entered. Her gaze moved from screen to screen, absorbing the chaos in seconds. How long? She asked. Until production resumes? Silence. The delivery driver watched from below as shoulders hunched and eyes dropped. He could almost hear the math running through their heads. Lost contracts. Penalties. Share prices. I need an answer, she said. An engineer swallowed. We're still isolating the root cause. Her jaw tightened. You've had 3 days. Yes, but nothing, she cut in. Every minute this place stays down, we bleed money. From the floor, the driver took a breath and stepped forward. His voice carried upward, steady despite the tension thickening around him. The root cause isn't isolated because you're looking at the wrong layer. Head snapped toward him. One of the executives frowned. Who is that? A delivery contractor, an engineer said quickly, as if that explained everything. The woman's gaze dropped, sharp and assessing. You, she said. What did you just say? The driver met her eyes. The failure is upstream. Timing misalignment between updated firmware and unchanged physical tolerances. The system thinks it's protecting itself, but it's reacting to its own echo. A murmur rippled through the room. Not agreement. Disbelief. One engineer laughed under his breath. Another crossed his arms. This is ridiculous. The woman didn't laugh. And you know this how? I've worked on systems like this, the driver replied. Designed them. Broke them. Fixed them. That did it. A senior engineer stepped forward, face flushed. With all due respect, he said, not meaning it at all, we didn't ask for input from someone delivering boxes. A few people nodded. Someone snorted. The driver didn't react. You don't have to ask, he said. The system doesn't care who notices the problem. The executive's eyes flicked between them. Is there any chance, she asked slowly, that he's right? The engineer bristled. We've been over every variable. Every variable you assumed mattered, the driver said quietly. The room stiffened. That's enough, the engineer snapped. You're out of line. Security shifted closer, hands resting near their belts. The woman exhaled sharply. I don't have time for philosophical debates. Neither do I, the driver replied. That's why I'm telling you now. The longer you wait, the worse the feedback loop becomes. The engineer laughed again, louder this time. You hear that? He thinks he understands feedback loops. The laughter this time was harsher, edged with something ugly. The kind of laughter that reinforced hierarchy, that reminded everyone who belonged and who didn't. The driver felt it land, heavy but familiar. I'm just saying, he began. Stop, the engineer cut in. You're embarrassing yourself. The woman raised a hand. Silence fell again. If he's wrong, she said, we lose nothing by ignoring him. If he's right. He's not, the engineer insisted. She looked at him. Are you willing to stake your job on that? The engineer hesitated. The delivery driver took advantage of the pause. Give me 10 minutes, he said. I won't touch anything without permission. Just let me show you where to look. Security stepped closer. The engineer scoffed. This is unbelievable. The woman studied the driver for a long moment. What's your name? She asked. He answered. She nodded once, then turned back to the engineers. You have 1 hour, she said. If this plant isn't operational by then, we shut it down and relocate production. Permanently. A chill rippled through the room. She turned back to the driver. You said 10 minutes? Yes. She checked her watch. You have 5. The engineer opened his mouth to protest, but she silenced him with a look. At this point, she said, I'm open to miracles. The driver stepped toward the control console. Security watched him closely, ready to intervene. Engineers leaned in despite themselves, skepticism mixing with fear. He didn't rush. He didn't grandstand. He simply asked for access to a specific diagnostic view that no one had opened yet. That's not relevant, someone muttered. It will be, he replied. As the screen populated with raw timing data, his finger traced a pattern in the air. There, he said. See that drift? An engineer leaned closer. That's minimal. It's compounding, the driver replied. Every cycle, it amplifies. The woman's expression sharpened. Can you stop it? Yes, he said. But you won't like how. The room went still. What do you need? She asked. Permission to bypass the automated safety recalibration, he replied. Temporarily. The engineer stiffened. That's insane. It's controlled, the driver said. And reversible. The woman looked at the engineer. Is he right? The engineer hesitated again, then shook his head. I wouldn't risk it. She looked back at the driver. And you would? Yes. The hum of the emergency systems seemed to grow louder, as if the building itself was listening. She took a slow breath. If this fails, she said, you walk out of here escorted. The driver nodded. Fair. Her finger hovered over the authorization tablet. The engineer whispered urgently. You can't be serious. She pressed confirm. The system chimed. All eyes snapped to the screens. The first recalibration sequence began. Nothing exploded. Nothing shut down. For a moment, nothing happened at all. Then one indicator light shifted from red to amber. A bell twitched. The room held its breath. And the delivery driver watched the countdown in his head, knowing that if the next cycle didn't stabilize, everything he'd warned them about would hit at once. The indicator light didn't turn green right away. It pulsed amber, slow and deliberate, like the system itself was deciding whether it trusted what had just been done. The hum in the room shifted pitch, no longer shrill with panic but not yet calm either. Every pair of eyes stayed locked on the screens, nobody blinking, nobody breathing too loudly. The delivery driver didn't move. His hands rested lightly on the console, not pressing anything, not rushing the process. He knew better than to interfere now. This part wasn't about force. It was about patience. Why hasn't it flipped? An engineer whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. Because it's checking itself, the driver said quietly. You taught it to. One of the engineers scoffed under his breath. That's not how. The woman at the center of the room raised a finger, silencing him without looking. Her eyes stayed on the data stream scrolling across the main monitor. Explain, she said. When the firmware was updated, the driver continued, the system was told to prioritize efficiency over redundancy. It learned to question anything that didn't match its new expectations. But the physical system still behaves the old way. So now every time it runs, it thinks it's making a mistake and tries to correct it. Over and over. Like a stutter, someone murmured. Like an echo, the driver replied. It hears itself and panics. The amber light flickered again. Then another one joined it. A second conveyor line powered up halfway before pausing, frozen mid-motion. A nervous laugh escaped someone in the back. It's kind of working. Not yet, the driver said. Don't touch anything. The engineers exchanged glances. This wasn't how they were used to operating. Normally, they attacked problems aggressively, layering fixes on top of fixes, overwhelming the system until something gave. This was different. This was restraint. A timer on the screen ticked down, marking the end of the recalibration cycle. 5 seconds. 4. 3. A warning tone sounded, sharp, brief. Here it comes, the driver said softly. The room tensed. Then the tone cut off. The amber lights turned green. A conveyor belt rolled forward smoothly, carrying a test component along its track. A robotic arm completed a full cycle, placing a piece precisely where it was meant to go. Another system came online, then another, like a row of dominoes falling in reverse. The silence broke into a rush of sound, motors spinning up, belts humming, systems syncing. The factory breathed again. For a moment, no one spoke. The noise was too beautiful. Too unexpected. Then the room erupted. What the hell? It's stabilizing. Loads holding steady. Run a stress check. Don't, the driver said sharply. That stopped them cold. You stress it now, he continued. You'll break the rhythm. Let it settle. The woman turned to him, eyes narrowed but not hostile. How long? 2 minutes, he said. Then you can push it. She nodded once. You heard him. The engineers reluctantly stepped back from their keyboards. Some crossed their arms. Some stared at the screens as if afraid the green lights might vanish if they looked away. The 2 minutes felt longer than the last 3 days combined. When the driver finally nodded, the stress test began. Load increased gradually. Temperature held. Timing stayed aligned. The feedback loop remained flat. It worked. A collective exhale filled the room, followed by applause that started awkwardly and then grew louder. A few engineers laughed, not out of humor but relief, the kind that left knees weak. The driver stepped away from the console, rolling his shoulders slightly as if releasing tension he'd been carrying longer than anyone realized. The woman approached him slowly. You didn't just guess, she said. You knew. Yes, he replied simply. From where? She asked. He hesitated, then answered. From experience you stopped valuing. That landed harder than any insult. One of the senior engineers cleared his throat. We still need to understand how he. You will, the woman said, not taking her eyes off the driver. Later. She studied him closely now, really looking. The calm posture. The way he hadn't celebrated. The lack of surprise when things went right. What are you doing delivering parts? She asked. He smiled faintly. Paying bills. That's not an answer. It's the honest one. She folded her arms. What were you doing before? Designing control systems, he said. Leading teams? Fixing messes? A ripple moved through the engineers. Why did you stop? She asked. He glanced around the room. At the faces that had laughed. At the ones that still wouldn't meet his eyes. Because eventually, he said, being right isn't enough if people don't want to hear you. No one laughed this time. The woman nodded slowly, absorbing that. You said you'd fix it in 10 minutes, she said. You did it in less. The driver shrugged. The problem wasn't hard. It was ignored. A junior engineer spoke up hesitantly. Why didn't any of us see it? The driver looked at him kindly. You were trained to look for complexity, he said. Sometimes the failure hides in the simplest assumption. The plant manager burst into the room, eyes wide. Production's fully operational, he said. Output's already recovering. The woman turned back to the screens, then to the room. Good, she said. Because we're not done here. She faced the driver again. I want you upstairs. Office level. The driver blinked. I still have deliveries. You don't anymore, she replied. One of the senior engineers stiffened. You can't just. She cut him off with a glance. I can. Security stepped back, no longer hovering. As they walked toward the elevator, whispers followed them. Not mocking this time. Curious. Unsettled. Inside the elevator, the woman finally relaxed her shoulders. You handled that room better than most executives I know, she said. He shrugged again. Rooms like that taught me how. She studied him. You never raised your voice. I didn't need to, he replied. The truth was loud enough. The elevator doors opened onto a quieter floor, carpeted and polished, far removed from the chaos below. She gestured toward her office. Sit, she said. He did. I'm going to ask you a question, she said. And I want a straight answer. All right. Did you come here today knowing you could fix this? He considered it. I suspected, he said. Once I heard the alarms. And if we hadn't listened? He met her gaze. Then the plant would have shut down. She nodded slowly. And you would have walked away? Yes. A small smile touched her lips. You know what the engineers called you before this? He didn't answer. They called you a distraction, she said. A risk. He smiled faintly. I've been called worse. Her expression hardened. That ends today. She leaned forward. Because what you did just saved this company tens of millions of dollars. He didn't react. But more than that, she continued, you exposed a failure we didn't know we had. She stood. We hired 15 engineers to solve this. And you hired me to deliver boxes, he replied gently. She smiled sharply. No, she said. I hired you to remind us what intelligence actually looks like. Down on the production floor, the machines ran smoothly, unaware of the shift happening above them. Engineers watched the systems with new eyes now, second-guessing assumptions they never questioned before. And somewhere between the hum of restored power and the quiet recalibration of pride, the man they'd dismissed sat across from. The office overlooked the entire plant, glass stretching from floor to ceiling, offering a clear view of the machinery below now moving in perfect rhythm. From up here, the factory looked calm, obedient, almost elegant. It was hard to believe that less than an hour ago, it had been on the brink of collapse. The woman stood near the window, hands clasped behind her back, watching the lines run. She didn't turn around when she spoke. Do you know what almost shut us down today? The delivery driver sat quietly, posture relaxed but attentive. Fear, he said after a moment. And pride. She nodded slowly. Fear of being wrong, she added. Pride that kept people from admitting it. She turned then, studying him again. I built this company on innovation. Or at least, that's what I told myself. A pause. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing credentials with intelligence. He didn't interrupt. She walked back to her desk, tapped her tablet, and brought up a series of reports. 15 engineers. Combined experience of over 200 years. Brilliant people. Her eyes flicked up. And not one of them thought to question the premise they were given. Premises are comfortable, he said. They save time. Until they cost more than they save. She smiled faintly at that. You sound like someone who's been ignored before. He looked out the window, watching a conveyor glide past. More times than I can count. She took a seat across from him. I pulled your contractor file, she said. It's incomplete. He almost laughed. That sounds about right. No listed degree, she continued. No recent employment history that matches your skill level. Just gaps. Gaps are where people stop looking, he replied. Her eyes softened slightly. You didn't stop learning, though. No, he said. I just stopped being invited into the room. She leaned back, considering him. You know, she said, most people in your position would have enjoyed watching us fail. I didn't come here to watch anything burn, he said quietly. I came to deliver parts. And you ended up delivering clarity. The door behind them opened. A cluster of engineers stood hesitantly at the threshold, led by the same senior engineer who had laughed the loudest earlier. His confidence was gone now, replaced by something brittle. Come in, the woman said without looking away from the driver. They stepped inside. The senior engineer cleared his throat. We wanted to speak. She turned to him. Go on. He looked at the driver, then down at the floor, then back up again. We were wrong, he said. About the problem. And about you. The silence stretched. You didn't have to listen, the driver said calmly. You chose not to. The engineer swallowed. That doesn't excuse it. No, the driver agreed. It explains it. The woman stood. Here's what's going to happen, she said. Effective immediately, we are restructuring how problems are evaluated in this company. The engineers stiffened. From now on, she continued, solutions will be judged on merit, not titles. And anyone who dismisses input based on who delivers it rather than what it says, will answer to me. The senior engineer nodded stiffly. She turned to the driver. And you, she said, are no longer a contractor. He blinked. I didn't apply for a job. I know, she replied. That's why I'm offering you one. The engineers murmured. She tapped her tablet again and slid it across the desk toward him. Lead systems consultant, she said, with authority to challenge assumptions at any level. He didn't pick it up right away. What if I say no? He asked. She smiled. Then I'll ask why. He considered the tablet, then the factory below. Because I've been in rooms like this before, he said. And when the crisis ends, people forget the lesson. She leaned forward. Not this time. Everyone says that, he replied. She nodded. Which is why I'm putting it in writing. She turned the tablet so he could read the clause highlighted in bold. It wasn't about salary. It wasn't about title. It was about veto power. His eyebrows lifted slightly. You're serious? I am, she said. Because today proves something I can't afford to ignore. He finally picked up the tablet, scanning the terms carefully. The room held its breath again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. He set the tablet down. I'll accept, he said. On one condition. She didn't hesitate. Name it. That the first thing we do, he said, is retrain how people listen. A slow smile spread across her face. Done. The senior engineer shifted uncomfortably. He began. She raised a hand. You'll work with him, she said. Not under him. With him. The driver met the engineer's eyes. There was no triumph there. No revenge. Just expectation. I don't need apologies, he said. I need honesty. The engineer nodded. You'll have it. Later, as the office cleared and the factory settled into a steady hum, the woman walked with him toward the elevator. You know, she said, there's already talk downstairs. About what? He asked. About how a delivery driver solved what 15 engineers couldn't. He smiled faintly. That story's already wrong. She glanced at him. How so? Because the problem wasn't intelligence, he said. It was who you decided was allowed to use it. The elevator doors opened. As he stepped inside, she added, one more thing. He turned. Tomorrow, she said, I want you in that control room. Front and center. He nodded. I'll be there. The doors closed, and as the elevator descended, he caught his reflection in the polished metal walls. Same uniform. Same tired eyes. But something had shifted behind them. On the production floor, engineers moved differently now. Slower. More deliberate. Listening before speaking. Questioning before defending. The machines ran smoothly, but it wasn't the machinery that had been fixed. It was the culture. By the time he stepped out into the fading afternoon light, the factory behind him was alive again, not just with motion, but with possibility. And somewhere inside, the echo that once caused panic had finally been silenced by something far more powerful than authority or arrogance. It had been silenced by listening. Because brilliance doesn't announce itself with titles or uniforms. Sometimes it just shows up with a delivery cart, waiting to see who's willing to hear it speak.